Thank you, George, for that nice introduction. I remember you well, and it's good to be back. And thank you, Laknath, also for introducing me. I'm delighted to be here. I don't know, how you do it, but I can talk about a project and how I went about doing it. I think what you will see is having a team is critical to doing good work, and no one stands alone. We stand on the shoulders of the people who have done work in the past, but the most important is the teams that you work with. But let me get to the research, and I know there's time for presentation and Q&A, but I would prefer that we do Q&A as we go along, and stop me anytime. And George, if you wouldn't mind, just keep a track on the chat. I saw some people welcoming me, and I do appreciate those notes. I was not able to respond right away on the chat. So if you keep an eye on that and stop me when you see a question on the chat that I need to address, because I'll focus on the presentation. I hope everyone can hear me. And what I'm going to do is to talk about this work with the idea of what others can learn, not just by following the findings and the logic and so on, but how to go about doing things. So pay attention to those kinds of ideas, and feel free to ask me about projects you're doing and how to apply some of the things that you may learn as we go through the presentation. You can call me Jagdip, no need to address me formally. So let's get started. So what I'm going to do is talk about this idea of digital negotiations and how we can study them, because it's a new area. The COVID and the internet has made it more likely that salespeople are not able to go face-to-face. They're interacting through other media, email being the most predominant. The first time that this is going on. But before I get into the study itself, I want to talk a little bit about the Frontlines area. By Frontlines, we simply mean understanding how customers and firms interact. That's a basic idea. It's been around for a long time. But something has changed, and you'll see from all these projects that I'm working on currently, the thing that's changed is technology has enabled us to, first of all, rethink how we can connect. And my coming to presenting here through Zoom is a clear indication of that. And number two, as this event is being recorded, you have real data, and that data can be analyzed after the call is finished. We don't have to survey people. We don't have to ask them what happened. We observe and we analyze, and we can get insights by working with raw data. This raw data was not available to us before. It was a black box. And you can see the emails have been the rising trend in how B2B interactions occur. There are many reasons. It's convenient, 24/7, stuff like that. But the most important, I think, is companies want to keep a track of communications for internal records. So I think that is a very important element. It is very flexible. It's very transparent, so everybody can see what's going on. The email has this nice feature that you can put all kinds of attachments, links, and other things in it, so that it can carry a lot of information in it. And all doesn't have to be said. You can provide links so people can check for themselves. The problem is, I think it's constrained. We cannot have very long emails. And in the business emails, I think academics still do Dear, Jagdeep, and all that. But in the B2B, they don't do all that. They just go direct to the point. And often when I interact with business executives, as I often do for my research, there is no beating around the bush. It's very, very pithy in terms of the content. That's just nature of these emails. And they become impersonal. Because you cannot say, have a nice July 4th event. I hope you'll put your mask on. No, nothing like that. We just close, and often they don't even say regards. They just close with the point that needs to be made. Part of it is busyness. Part of it is to be professional. part of us is to remain very business-like in these interactions. And that makes it a little different to study than what you can do in face-to-face. In face-to-face, there is ability to communicate far more intangibles through your body, through your features. And it always has some room to play with where you can be personal without breaking that line. That is, all the things they've learned in influence and how to use that tactic carefully and strategically in face-to-face settings. How do they translate into emails? And number two, how do buyers process these communications? So one is on salesperson focus, the other is on buyer focus. And I think the idea really here is, does it translate well? Do our theories of influence that we have developed, refined, validated by using either face-to-face context or using self-report measures, which most of them are, do they apply to this new setting? And number two, what's the mechanism that's going on behind it? Because one has too many ideas which are interesting, but not enough ideas which can be taken forward, because they either have already been done in one way or the other, or you can't find the good data. I was speaking to another colleague here in India, and she had this project she was really interested in doing, but never could get the data. So without the data, there is no way you can go forward. So both things have to come together. And I'll talk about both here in a minute. The first is in terms of theory. Are we really making a contribution even though it is a different context? Meaning context is not enough to get involved in a project. And often what I do is, of course, you keep reading the literature and know what's happening in that area. And after a while, you begin to get a good sense of where the interesting material is and what to read. But meta-analysis are a very useful way to see a summary sense of the field. So in this particular project, it so turned out that JAMS in 2018 had published a meta-analysis of influence strategies. And it is not the only piece I used, but this is a piece I can communicate to you in terms of where what I'm going to do fits in order to show that time spent on this project is warranted. How to find ideas where to spend time and ideas where not to spend time. So in other words, where I just finished the discussion with Lucknow, I think you should take it from the idea. Understanding where the boundaries are is not as interesting as understanding how people break them. So in other words, the shifting of the question is a very important way of figuring out where to spend your time and energy. That's another thing to remember, the surprise. You don't do studies to show, prove something that you already know is going to be this way. That doesn't help. You got to have some surprise for yourself, not because it's interesting. And what's a surprise here? The interactions may have negative effects. Doing both or doing one or the other may lead to not positive, but negative outcomes. And nobody had really shown any of that. We didn't know exactly how this will turn out. And as I said, surprise is good because you have something interesting to say at the end if it turns out. But the most important, I think, is surprise is good for you because it keeps you thinking about the project, keeps you active and involved in the idea. If it's intuition and you're showing what you already know, it's not that interesting for you or for the readers. In the PhD, I think there you go in with always two things in mind. That every year you'll add new articles to the syllabus. It's a pain because you got to read all of them and develop but that effort is worth doing. I told you, anything that's easy is a bad idea. If using the last year's syllabus is easy, tell yourself, don't do it, man. This is not good. Life is interesting if it has friction in it. And why? Because in that new article, that is new for you maybe also, and as students workshop it, new ideas will germinate in just a discussion of that article. It's not the old thing. And it is unfortunate that as humans, when we see the same thing, we repeat what we said before. And that becomes a habit, and it's no good. The second thing I do in a PhD course is to blend I would say, data and research in the learning. And I've now applied at the master's level too. And the bottom line advice that I give to the student, and I implement that too, is that if you think a paper is really good and strong and related to what you're trying to do, get the actual raw data for that paper and redo the analysis. And today it's easier to do now. I've been doing it for 20 years. I would write to the authors and then get their data, give it to the students, then they would reanalyze it. And then I will invite the authors to come over and spend time with the students who had analyzed their work. And I can tell you, each meeting of that is just dynamite in terms of ideas, not just for me, but for them too. But today you have the OSF, which is the Open Science Forum, where most data are published as free resource for students to replicate, to reanalyze, and to advance what somebody did in the paper. And I found that doing, not just reading, doing and reading, alternating, iterating, is the key to develop skills which are useful for doing research. And all my courses have that. I will take some new articles. I'll get the data, the actual raw data that the authors used for that. I'll give it to students, and I'll do it myself too, and see if they can reproduce all the analysis in the paper. And then I'll ask them to extend, do something that the authors didn't think of, but you have the data now to do it. And that would be like the alternative competing hypothesis test. And then I'll have the author themselves to come in and talk to them and explain why they did this, not that. How would they explain the new findings students have come up with? So I think those are two lessons I would say. Just take an article that you like, recent published, good journal, get the data, and just do the work. And don't think you're wasting time. All I can say is after 25 years of doing it, you're not wasting time. That is how you'll go forward. I see.
But now that I'm here, I actually want to say it was hugely insightful. I mean, I'm actually a consumer researcher, anthropology, and I have learned so much. And so thank you very much. I'm sure I express my gratitude for your presentation and your style and the way your huge experience comes through in terms of the nuance, in terms of the nuance and so on how to conduct research. And it's really instructive as well for our PhD students and young early careers as well. And also, I don't want to say I'm an old timer, but certainly a bit more experienced. Someone like me to learn so much. So yeah, thank you. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you as well to George for organizing this wonderful, wonderful moderator and host. Thank you.
Thank you for having me and listening to my work. I hope it is of value to you in what you're doing, and best of luck in doing that.
Thank you. And thank you all.
So goodbye to everyone, and keep safe as we continue to battle the variant.